Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another video, and I hope that you're all doing very well. I spoke to somebody last night, and the person said to me, well, you haven't discussed anything on your high school years. And I said to him, well, I haven't really finished my primary school years yet. So I think I must just maybe finish my primary school years so that we can go on to the next chapter, which is the high school years, of which I have already done one huge part of what happened in my secondary school years. So back to my primary school years to see if we can wrap it up today. One thing that came to mind when I thought about it was that in retrospect, I think that my dad had some hoarding issues. If I see the stuff that he kept, that he couldn't get rid of, which my mom passed on to me when she didn't want to have it in her house anymore. And it was difficult for me to throw some of the stuff away. In his position as a managing director, he worked for Bostik, especially in purchasing. A lot of the customers, I don't know if it's still the same nowadays, but in those days, a lot of the customers, the buyers, would then inundate my father with presents over Christmas time. A lot of it had their company logos on, but some of it didn't. And he got some nice stuff. Obviously, the glasses and those kind of things my mom would use. But there was letter openers and pencils, paperweights, calculators, all sorts of nice things. And there was stuff that he was also sorry to use, which he kept for years and years and years. And now that I actually went through everything, a lot of those stuff has become ugly with age, just lying in a box. And that is a fact, people. Keeping stuff in a box. And I wish I would get it into my own head, because going through my stuff myself, not being able to throw things away, putting it back in a box for the rest of my life, this last session of my life, somebody eventually is going to throw it away. It doesn't last. Keeping it is futile. Use the stuff. If you buy something, use it for what you have bought it for. Otherwise, don't buy it. Otherwise, you are a compulsive buyer. Listen to somebody that knows what she's talking about. So then a lot of the calculators doesn't work anymore. So now why did he keep it? He had some rulers with a calculator in the ruler. He was too sorry to use it. You can't use it anymore. The calculators don't work. It's like technology, my video camera that I have, I can't play it back over a TV anymore. I can still play it over my desktop computer, but the disc, I had to download a more current driver because my computer Windows doesn't want to take that old disk anymore. So even with technology, things become redundant. I've got photos on discs, which I put on discs of years ago, which I can't look at now anymore because I've got nothing to play it on. So then that begs the question: hard copy or technology on a memory stick or on your computer? I lost some wonderful footage I had of wagtails. I had a pair of wagtails that made a nest in front of my kitchen three years in a row. And the last year, I actually decided that I was going to video and capture the babies from the day that the eggs have hatched until the day that they were big enough to, not fledglings, because I actually documented that as well, that I didn't see them anymore, that the parents chased them out of their territory. And I lost that. Those hackers were very clever. They hacked into your computer, and I actually documented them every single day. I wouldn't go and bother them that to the point where I irritated the parents. But when the parents left the nest to go and get food, I would get onto a chair and I would take one or two photos because they normally have 3 babies. I took a photograph every single day as those babies were growing up, and it was on my computer, and those hackers hacked into my computer, and then they send you an email and say that they have now taken your photographs and it's stored someplace in the cloud, and if you want it back you must pay X amount of money into the account. Fortunately, I didn't fall for that one because it's not stored somewhere in a cloud. You would have paid that money into the account, not getting any photographs back, and you would be out of that money as well. So fortunately, I didn't fall for that joke. But my heart was very, very sore because I lost something very, very special. So my dad also kept a lot of stuff. He went to a lot of lunches as well, and then they would get a name tag. And he kept every single name tag. And I cannot tell you how hard it was for me to throw some of those name tags away. I decided that I would keep 2 or 3 of the many that he had. And it was difficult for me to get it over my heart to throw it away. So, yeah, I think I've got some of that from my father in retrospect, actually. Then he had this thing that he had colon cancer at some point in time. Pardon me. And they removed part of his colon. And then he had to wear a bag for a few months, couple of months, until they could rejoin the 2 parts of the colon. And what do they call that bag? A stoma. I'm not sure what they call that bag. So he had to go for quite a few colonoscopies. And yeah, this is typical of my father. So he had a non-permanent marker in the toilet. And every time that he then went to the toilet, he would write on the tiles the time and how the emptying of the bowel was progressing. So he was also a bit of a statistic freak. Stats was huge for him. He had this thing as well. If we were going somewhere, but that's from his rally days. He used to drive rallies and race rallies. Or I don't know if you race a rally or you drive a rally, but he used to do rallies. And then timing was a big thing. The rallies were very different from how they do rallies nowadays. It was all about timing. There were 2 people in the car, and the one was doing the timing, and the other one was doing the driving. So he had this thing that if we went somewhere, whether we went to visit my grandparents or whether we were going on a holiday, he will not leave 1 minute sooner than what he decided in his head that we will leave the house, because that drive should take 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 3 hours, depending on where we were going. And that is exactly how we will, the speed that he would be driving at, so that it would take us 3 hours or 15 minutes to get from point A to point B. That was my father. And he used to get very upset if you would say, well, all of us were ready now 15 minutes before he decided that we can now get into the car to go somewhere. And then there will be fights because he would not get into that car 1 minute before he decided that was that was the time that he was leaving the house. So I think that a lot of this side of me that I have become very aware of and that I am struggling with, I actually inherited from my father. The other thing was he gave up the hymns that we used to sing in the church. He was a deacon and then he was an elder later on in years. And we always had like a half an hour before the service started that we did some singing in the church. And then a deacon or an elder would lead that. So he would say we would sing Psalm so and so and verse so and so. And my dad started to make a huge study of it. He bought some books on the origin of those hymns. And so he would first tell a little story about every hymn, which he decided that we are going to sing um, during that session and where it came from, a whole little history. So he also had difficulty to do things in moderation. He went a little bit overboard as far as that concerned. And also when he studied for his Masters in Business Leadership through the University of South Africa, that he did through the post, long distance. He didn't actively attend the classes at the university. I don't know what you call it overseas when you study like that. Also, he did a huge thing. He used to make little cards with key facts on, and he would put that on his steering wheel or on the visor. And yeah, so I think that part or, of my personality or those tendencies that I have, I actually got from my father for sure. Now, if I think about it, so it's not something that just fell out of the air or some bad habits that I've developed. I think that maybe I inherited it or it was passed on to me. Um, why am I such a neat freak? Uh, you won't say it if you look at my house, but if you look in my cupboards, you will see that I have some issues with neatness. Things must be in a row and very square. My cupboards are packed very neatly and very organized, if it's possible. Sometimes it is not possible to pack dishes or stuff so that they all stand very squarely in my cupboards. But I used to get the most terrible hidings if my room was not tidy as a child. I don't know, I can't remember that my mom did that with my two elder sisters. Maybe I was more messy than they were. And I'm not talking about making a mess in my room with paints and crayons and toys. I'm talking when I was already past that stage, just with clothes. If I didn't put my clothes away in my cupboard immediately, if I left something lying around on the floor, I would get a hiding for that. Not just a little tap on my bum or a talking, I would get a hiding. And I think that has caused me to have developed a problem as far as that's concerned, because I became obsessed with keeping my cupboards clean as a child already and packing my stuff in little straight heaps and rows. So a problem already started to develop then already, which was ignited, I think, by parents' blindness to the fact that not all children and all people are exactly the same, and that you can't press all your children in the same cookie press or into the same mold, and the damage you are going to do to that person if you are going to force that onto that child. It is very important to allow a child to naturally develop and grow into the person that that child is supposed to be, and not to try and conform that child to what you as the parent would want that child to become, or what you think that child is supposed to be. It doesn't work that way. Personalities are different, vastly different. And some people are more sensitive than others and must be handled with just a little bit more care and sensitivity than others. My elder sister actually apologized to me not so long ago because she said she remembered that she and my middle sister used to be so ugly to me. They're very close to one another. They're 18 months apart. And then I'm a little bit behind. I'm 4 and 5 years, respectively, younger than they are. But the funny thing is, at that point in time, I did experience it as being pushed out and that they never wanted anything to do with me, or that I couldn't be with them. It was the two of them, and they never wanted me to be with them. But somehow, I don't think that that actually damaged me much. I think that I I accepted the fact that that's what older siblings do. If there is a much younger sibling, I might be wrong. I might now be missing the ball completely. But so they shared a bedroom, and I always had my own bedroom from the day that I was born till the day that I left the house. And I didn't have a problem with that. Maybe that's where that part of me developed, that I don't mind being by myself, that I actually prefer to be by myself, that I'm a little bit of a loner, that I'm not really a very social person. Maybe that can be an explanation for it, because I was never sort of allowed to join my sisters in whatever they were doing. And when you're at school, then that's quite a big age gap. So I can understand that. You know, they didn't want their little sister around, especially when they started to uh, become interested in boys, and boys started to look at them. Then you don't want this little tail tattling behind you all the time, because the boys won't like that. Anyway, I understand that. But when I was at that stage where I couldn't speak English, I didn't understand English, then and they could, then they would then speak in English with one another if I was in the room with them, because they didn't want me to be part of the conversation and to understand what they were talking about. And then when I started to learn and understand English, they then went and they taught themselves sign language. Where the almost like the deaf, but not completely. Where it's a your vowels are on your one hand, and then J K, if I can remember correctly. Can't remember all the letters, but they had like a sign language which they then developed between the two of them, which they then conversed with one another if I was in the rounds, because they didn't want me to understand and be part of the conversation. I'm laughing about now. I think it was a bit maybe um, traumatic for me when I was a child. So I always used to have to play with myself and entertain myself, and but I don't begrudge them that for some other reason. I don't know if it did do a little bit of psychological damage or whether it didn't, but um, they were ugly to me, and very much so. I was very much pushed out to the side. I wasn't part of. We were two siblings and then one. It wasn't like we were three siblings. Uh, yes, there's a few incidents that I can remember from primary school years, and which I forgot to tell. And my mom told some story that I was very small, and we were on holiday in Bloemfontein with an uncle of my mom, and I don't know how that happened, because apparently the doctors and the nurses weren't very happy with my parents. But I got hold of a bottle of aspirin or some medication. I was very tiny. I think I must have just been the age where I was crawling or started to walk, maybe between. And I drank the whole bottle of. I ate the bottle of tablets, and I had to be rushed to the hospital, and my stomach had to be in. Well, for a long time we said that they pump your stomach. I don't know if that's the term still. If they have to clean out your stomach, that they pump it. And but I can't remember much of that. I honestly must say I can't remember much of that. But I don't know if subconsciously that you register something traumatic if you are in a hospital and you might be tied down as a baby, that you can't take pipes out, or that I was separated from my parents, that might be traumatic for a person and get stuck somewhere in your brain, in your subconscious. Because I can remember when I was in grade 2, that's sub B, the old sub B. It was still the old primary school building. I went to school like any normal day, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I had a panic attack at that young age. That means I was a year too young for my standard. So I was supposed to be 8, but I was 7. Out of the blue, I became panicky that my mother was going to forget to come and fetch me at school. I can remember it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. And I asked that teacher from when it started to happen. At that age, you go home at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock? 12 o'clock, I think. And it must have happened around about 10 o'clock. And for those last 2, 3 hours of that school day, I asked that teacher every 10 minutes if I could go to the secretary. And she allowed me to go to the secretary, to go and ask the secretary if she remembered to phone my mom, to tell my mom that she mustn't forget to come and fetch me from school today. That was the strangest thing. I don't know where it came from, what caused it. That secretary must have been so irritated with me. They must have prayed for 12 o'clock to come soon. And how the teacher didn't say to me, no, I can't go, was actually very good of her, because I think maybe she realized that that would have caused more anxiety and more stress for me. But I had to go and ask that secretary continuously. Did she phone my mom? Did she remember to phone my mom? She mustn't forget to phone my mom. My mom mustn't forget to come and fetch me from school that day. And my mom was angry with me when I got into that car, when the bell rang. She shouted at me and carried on with me. What's wrong with you? And she carried on with me. I can remember, and I was in tears, and I cannot explain why it happened, but it happened. And then there was another occasion when the same thing happened. I had a a, a very high temperature, fever came along, also unexplained, out of the blue. But it was so high that I became delirious. I became confused. And I can remember that. Strangely enough, I can remember that. I can remember holding my mom, calling for my mom to come to me. I can remember that. I was still at home. I can remember seeing things crawling up the wall, and I was tiny. I can remember my mom giving me baths to try and break the fever. And then the doctor said if the fever doesn't break, then they will have to take me to hospital, because then they thought it might be meningitis. And I had to go to the hospital eventually, and they did a lumbar punch where they pull some of your spinal fluid, which was very traumatic for me. That I can remember. It is painful. I don't know if it's still painful. It's almost like an epidural, I think. I don't know what the epidural is like, but I know it's something to do also with the spine. It was very, very painful. And I was in hospital for an extended period of time. I can still remember my mom's father, my grandfather on my mom's side. He used to work at the hospital, uh, coming to visit me. And the one puzzle that he brought me was a puzzle of a giraffe. I can remember that clearly, clearly. He brought me two puzzles. I can't remember the second one, but I can remember one of the puzzles were of a giraffe. And when the doctors told me that if your stomach go, then I can go home the next day. Mm. And my bed was right by the nurse's station. And I remember starting to call those nurses from about 3 o'clock that morning till the next morning, that they mustn't forget to phone my mom and tell her that I can go home and that she must come and fetch me. Those nurses must have been so fed up with me. But they weren't. I can remember that they were like the teacher, very patient, very understanding, very kind, very soft, very loving. But I can remember that I nagged them, and it was like constantly, please, did you phone my mom? It was about like every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes. Please don't forget to phone my mom to tell her that she must come and fetch me. She can come and fetch me tomorrow. I can go home. You mustn't forget me. That's very strange, but I can remember that happening. It's almost like a anxiety attack or a phobia. I don't know what caused it, but I also find it strange that I didn't want to be any other place but home, in light of the fact that home wasn't a pleasant place for me to be in. I often wished that I was never born, that I wasn't there, and I often wished that my parents wasn't there. It's terrible to admit, but I did. And that's why I said on a previous video that I think that there should be extenuating circumstances for children that sometimes kill their parents, because we then punish the child. But the people that did that to the child, the stories that we do not know, that the parents won't tell and the parents won't admit to, what did they do to that child? What did that child experience to get to a point where that child snapped? Because just like a grown up, I think, or an animal, a child can also snap. We are all just human. And I think for a parent, one parent or two parents, that damage a child to that extent where it gets to a point where something like that happens, where it actually drove that child over the edge of the cliff. Or what did those parents do for a child to reach that point in such a young life? It should be the parents that must be punished before it gets to a stage where a child actually snaps and then take the life of his parents or her parents. Parents should be held accountable for emotionally and psychologically damage their children to a point where they become non-functional adults in society. Because people, I tell you, that does not happen by itself. Every single child comes into this world as a clean slate for the parents to work with, a clean canvas. And what they paint on that canvas is what that baby is going to become and develop into. And parents should be held accountable for it. There is an equal amount, if not more amount of damage you can do to a baby and a toddler and a child than just physical abuse where you broke the child's arm or where you burn a child with cigarettes or where where the physical abuse is to that extent. There's different forms of lasting damage that parents can do to their children. And then the child, as a non functional, unstable adult, must now try and navigate the rest of their life with, the heavy chains that their parents have shackled them because of the way that they handled them and treated them as children in that family unit that you are born into. And that's why I don't believe that I watched a YouTube channel where this little child was telling her mother that she chose them. The whole story, which is mind-boggling if you actually listen to the story. But I cannot, pardon me, but I cannot for 1 second imagine myself being somewhere in some conscious state, choosing my parents or the family that I was born into. There is no way that I would have made that choice for myself. Absolutely, absolutely no way. I've got 3 more events to cover. I think that I have then almost done everything that I can recall of my primary years. If something of significance come to mind, then I will just sort of pop it into another video. Okay, the first one of those 3 major events was again back at the Eisteddfort. And my mom decided that I must do a recital. My mom, I think, must have been jealous of some of the higher society people, the doctor's wife and children, or the minister's wife and children, or the school principal's wife and children, or some other rich person that stay in one of the more upper uh, neighborhoods, children. Because why she decided that I must do a recital at an Eisteddfort, being the nervous wreck that I by that time already was, and having severe stage fright, only she will know. And I can remember the poem, or whatever you want to call it, that was prescribed. It was Mina Aap. That is something about an ape. The ape's name was Mina. And now I had to memorize this, and then my mom now coached me, which you can just imagine with my mom's lack of patience altogether in what traumatic events those coaching sessions must have ended up in. Because now I must use my voice this way in that sentence, and I must wait X amount of time at the end of that sentence, and you must emphasize this word. Oh, Mina op. And we must have had the discussion that I didn't want to do it because I'm scared. Because my mom's answer to that was that I must not look at the people, I must focus on the clock that was hanging at the back of the hall. And in her mind, that would have solved everything. I went onto the stage and I started my recital. And like a good girl, I kept my eyes on the clock in the back of the hall until I realized that I could not see the clock in the back of the hall anymore because of the tears that was in my eyes because I was so scared. And then I started to concentrate on the fact that I couldn't see the clock anymore. The poem was as far away from my mind and my memory and recall as possible. And there I stood humiliated, made a complete ass of myself, and then had to walk off the stage. And I do not think that I have to tell you what then happened, because I then was delivered to my mom's rage and fury, because instead of have just left it and not have entered me into any event for me to possibly outshine some of the other children of parents who she was competing with, I now actually have caused her an embarrassment. And she saw it that I actually humiliated her. Um, yeah, that was a sad state of affairs. I had stage fright. I was scared, and no amount of coaching or exposing me to the situation was going to rectify that. Then my mom was in hospital for something. I can't remember what that was. And I was absolutely crazy over our neighbor's daughter and her boyfriend. They were grown-ups. They were at university already. Sarel and Suzette. Sarel Marais and Suzette Strombeck. I idolized them. She had the most stunning eyes. I can remember her also like it was yesterday. And they were this wonderful couple. And they bought me for a birthday. They bought me one of Snow White's gnomes. It was a little, like a grandfather clock. It was a little clock, and then it had the little pendulum that went swang backwards and forwards. And then as that moved to the left and to the right, the little gnome's eyes moved to the left and to the right. It was one of my most precious possessions I've ever had in my whole life. It broke and it couldn't be fixed. I had it still not. I don't know what happened to it. I don't have it. One of the things I didn't keep. I'm actually sorry that I don't have it anymore. But yeah, it was very, very special for me. And I think at that time it was quite an expensive little gift that they bought their neighbor's little girl, who was just their neighbor's little girl. But my mom was in hospital, my dad was at work, and my mom asked Sarel if he wouldn't mind taking my elder sister to her violin lesson, which was at that point in Bird Street Central. And I wanted to go along. I wasn't supposed to go along, but I then made the decision that I was going to go along on when Sorrel takes my sister to her violin lesson, because then I can wait with him in the car for the half an hour or 45 minutes. I think it was half an hour for the time that her lesson was. And I then did that. Well, my father was not very pleased with me when he came home. Now, of all the punishments that he could have thought to give me for a child that already hated music, uh, that already have performing issues with being scared and anxiety and stress and stage fright, He then decided that my punishment for going was going to be that he was going to sit and listen in the chair. I was going to have to play all my scales and my music pieces. And if I make one mistake, I was going to get the hiding of my life. And I made that one mistake because music wasn't my forte. And I got the hiding of my life. And then they can't understand why I couldn't play in public, why I had to drink beta blockers when I was at university, before my exams or before I had to perform, just so that I do not mess up a whole year's work of hours and hours of practicing daily, because I get stage fright and then I can't do anything. It actually made me that I could not do anything. I became like a zombie. That is how bad my stage fright used to be. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on, and then I'm going to wrap this off, uh, is I'm going to put the ring light off for this because I'm going to have to put my glasses on. When I was 10 years old, there must have been a competition in the newspaper, which my mom decided that she would like to be entered into. It was a competition for children on how great they thought their mothers were. The prize, I suppose, must have been significant. My dad actually cut this out and he kept it. And it was given to me at some point in time. But the point is, I didn't write it. My mom wrote it and gave it to me to write in my handwriting. Because this is definitely, everything she wrote was the truth. She did most of the things that she praised herself for. But that wasn't me. I definitely did not write this. And I'm going to read it in Afrikaans. What I'm going to, I'll just summarize for the people, the English speaking people. She basically praised herself for all the things that she thought she accomplished in life, and what a good mother she was. That she uh, cooked a warm meal for us every day. Um, that we didn't want to eat anybody else's food but her food. That she cooked jams, the cakes that she baked for our birthdays. The fact that she did a bricklayer's course. That she restrung pearl necklaces for a jewelry store in town. Um, for the garden, the ability for her gardening, the way that she laid the garden out, the fact that she painted of the house on the inside by herself, the fact that she made our clothes and the curtains. Well, she did a good job of praising herself. The fact that she sang. I used to hate my mom's singing voice. I used to hate lying in my bed and listening to her practicing. I just used to, I just did not think my mom sang had a nice voice. But in any case, she basically praised herself, and then I had to write the letter over in my handwriting for this competition. So I'm going to read it in Afrikaans because it was it's Afrikaans. Maar duisend, so net landman 10 jaar oud. I was 10 years old. Van Weststraat 12 Newton Park, Port Elizabeth skryf. Ek weet u. Now, where would I, as a 10-year-old child, use the term u in Afrikaans? That's like a respectful, it's like saying Mr. or Mrs. I would never have thought of doing that. Never ever. Ek weet u sal dink ek jok. Maybe my mom knew that they would think or realized that this wasn't written by a 10-year-old because she started the article or this little letter. I know you would think that I'm lying. What a way to start something. If I as a child wrote that of my mother and it was coming really from my heart, I would never have thought of saying you most probably would think I'm lying. Never ever. That wouldn't have crossed my mind. Ek weet jy sal dink ek jok as ek vir u sê waarom ek dink my ma moet die topma van die jaar wees. U sal maar self moet kom kyk om te sien dat my ma anders is as ander ma's! Exclamation mark. My ma is baie lief vir kook en kook elke dag ons kos. Pappa en ons kinders wil nie kos eet wat 'n bediende gekook het nie. Mamma onthaal ook graag. Mamma kook konfyt en lê elke jaar haar eie vrugte in en maak al ons klere. Sy brei graag wanneer sy tyd het, maak al haar eie gordyne en trek self die gordynkappe oor. Sy het ook al self stoele oorgetrek. Mamma verf self die huis van binne, want sy sê die werkers mors te veel. Mamma het ons hele tuin self uitgelê, tuinpaadjies en ook ons eie braaivleisplek gebou. Ons het 'n groot erf met 'n baie mooi tuin en 'n visdammetjie wat mamma gebou het. Mamma het 'n messelkursus gevolg. Mamma maak tuis halsnoere van gekweekte parels wat van Japan kom vir 'n juwelierswinkel in die stad. How on earth would a 10-year-old know or be interested to know where the pearls come from? The cultured pearls, the pearls come from that she sits and restrings at the dining room table when we must do our homework there. Haar stokperdjie is om te sing. Sy neem al baie jare sanglesse en sing by troues en ander geleenthede. Sy rangskik graag blomme en doen dit ook dikwels vir troues. Dan is sy ook lief om te skryf en 'n bietjie met olieverf te mors wanneer sy tyd kry. Sy het 'n 1-jarige kursus gevolg en haar diploma vir die skryf van kortverhale gekry. In die middag, en dis byna elke dag, moet sy met ons 3 kinders rondry vir sport, musiek ensovoorts. Mamma is ook al gekies om op die skoolkomitee te dien. Sy kan darm dink ook. Sy is ook nie groot en vet nie. Mamma is 1,51 meter lank en haar massa is 53 kilogram. A 10-year-old child would never use the word massa. As dit nou nie genoeg is nie, dan weet ek nie. Ek jok regtig nie. So the lying thing, she ends this again with that I'm really not lying. My ma is 'n ma docent. What my mom actually says about what she thinks of herself and her self-perception and the fact that she actually has been suffering from a tremendous inferiority complex from who knows when. This article actually says so much about my mother without her even realizing it. Now, why is that so atrocious? Because here is a letter that I wrote in my own handwriting as a 10-year-old. We went on a holiday to now Namibia, the old Southwest Africa, when I was in grade 5. That is the old standard 3. So I was then, how old would I have been? 10. I would have been 10 years old. Exactly the same age. That's why I'm actually doing this. Exactly the same age as that letter that my mom wrote about herself. Look at the you can't see because the camera actually turns everything around. But I made a spelling mistake with sauerkraut and I had to put the E in. There was no way I would actually write that. And then I actually did I marked the pages with Roman numerals. In any case, we toured with one of my mom's best friends, and they had a caravan, and we all they had 3 boys. So they were a family of 5, and we were a family of 5. 3 girls on this side, 3 boys on that side. Then obviously you put the tent up in front of the caravan, and the 10 people, actually, that's how we toured. We toured, we went to Swakopmund and Windhoek and the Namib Desert. We went to Etosha Game Reserve Park. We really, it was a memorable holiday, I must say. And why did I put sauerkraut up there in bold as the heading of my letter? Was because one of the meals that Auntie Hilda cooked for us was pork sausages, mash, and sauerkraut, which is actually a wonderful combination. Fermented food like sauerkraut and kimchi are actually stuff that you should eat if you have colon problems and stomach problems. But as a child of 10, you don't have a developed palate. And sauerkraut is now not one of the. And I used to love gherkins, pickled gherkins. It's still a favorite of mine, favorite. And but I don't know why sauerkraut didn't take my fancy. And so I wrote. So I wrote a thank you letter. I actually came back home and I wrote a little thank you letter to them to say thank you for the wonderful holiday and for how nice it was to be with them and the trouble that they went for us on the holiday and all the effort that she put into the meals that she prepared for us and the fun that I had. That was my little thank you letter to them, which I addressed to Auntie Hilda. And she kept this letter, and she was in a big car accident where she lost her sight. She passed away, and when her husband went through her stuff, he found this letter and he sent it back to my parents to give to me. And this is why I have this letter. And it warmed my heart to think that somebody would actually have kept something that I wrote when I was 10 years old as a momentum, as something special. And I wrote, Liewe Tannie Hilda, hier waar ek nou is, kry ek weer lus vir al die heerlike kosse van Tannie. Ek het 'n nuwe naam gekry vir Tannie en die karavaan en dit is die 5-star hotel. Now they made a little star for the 5-star hotel. Just compare this letter which I wrote, which came from my heart, and that one that my mom wrote, which I had to write in my handwriting as if I wrote that. And you will see what a farcical joke it really is. Okay, so I got the new name for the caravan, and that was the 5-star hotel. Met die baas. She was the boss of this 5-star hotel. H van Huisteen. Wat alles self behartig. Tannie, ek wil vir Tannie baie dankie, and I underlined many thanks, sê vir die Italiaanse slaie, and then I drew a little picture of the Italian salad. In Chinese rice, I drew a little picture of the Chinese rice. En die springbok vleis. I actually had a picture of a leg of springbok. En ook die worsies en die sop. En ons moenie die sauerkraut vergeet nie. And then I drew a face. It's not a happy face. Of the sauerkraut. Die padkos wat Tannie vir ons ingesit het, that was the food that she packed in for us to snack on the way back to Port Elizabeth. Het heerlik gesmaak. Tannie moet asseblief my pink onderbroek vir my in 'n dosie terugstuur. I must have forgotten my pink panty there, and I asked her to please put my pink panty in a little box and then to post it back to me. It must have been one of my favorite panties. Tannie, ek verlang baie. I couldn't spell verlang. I must say I thought that as a 10-year-old I should have written. My handwriting should have been better. Verlang, I couldn't spell it, so I just connected like that and I spelled it wrong. Tannie, ek verlang baie na Tannie. So I said to her that I really miss her a lot. Ek sal na Tannie toe kom, maar nie weer ice toe nie. Ice must have been not a very good experience for us. I think it was hot water fountains or something where you could swim. So I said I will come and visit her again, but I don't want to go to that place. Tannie moet my brief vir niemand wys nie. Why on earth would I have asked her to keep my letter a secret? That was a strange request I thought I made at the age of 10 years old. Because there was nothing in here that was wrong or should have been kept secretive. I don't know, it made no sense to me. Tannie moet my brief vir niemand wys nie. Dit is my en Tannie se geheim asseblief. Tannie moet vir die oom ook sê baie dankie vir al sy moeite. Ek sê ook nou baie dankie Tannie vir al Tannie se moeite en hulp en harde werk, which I underlined. Baie dankie. So it's also very repetitive. Nothing like that letter my mom wrote about herself. Tannie moet aan almal my groete oordra. Baie dankie vir al die moeite om die 5-ster hotel aan die gang te hou. Liefde van Sonet aan Tannie mevrou van Huisteen met 2 swinkies, 2 little kisses, maal 1000 keer. So I put 2 kisses times 1000 times en baie drukkies and many hugs. En dan sê ek sal weer skryf met 'n swinkie. I doubt if I ever wrote another letter. But yeah, I just thought that this was very indicative of a narcissistic mother and how much it actually said about narcissism. And on that note, I'm going to end off this video. I think I have now dealt with my primary years. So I'm now at age, let me just see, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12. I'm now at age 12. And if something significant comes up, then I will mention it. But I think that is the most memorable moments that stood out for me in those early years of my life. So I want to thank you for being here with me. If you got this far, I want to ask if you would consider to please subscribe, and I do hope sincerely that I would see you in another video and that you will get to the end of the videos, because at this point in time my average watching time is not more than 5 minutes. Which means the stuff that I say is very, very boring for most people. And I hope to see you in another video, and you must please keep well and look after yourselves. So important to do that and to embrace life and enjoy every moment that you have. Until next time.